Welcome to Living with Purpose with Todd Novaczyk. In Part 2, Todd and his guest, renowned neuropsychologist Dr. Paul Nussbaum, examine the role of live social connections, the importance of having a purpose, and how senior living communities can significantly enhance the health and well-being of seniors.
One of the things that I came across was the U.S. Surgeon General, I think this is about a year ago, came up with the concept that being lonely is like smoking 15 cigarettes per day. So if you think of the terrible effects, the terrible degeneration, becoming frailer and frailer, you're smoking, etc., ruining obviously your physical body, but mentally and socially as well. So he equated that loneliness as that harmful. And when I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, that would be horrific. I don't know how anybody could do that, but I'm sure people do. But that really struck me.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying a little bit earlier with the smoking analogy. And it's true because it increases risk of mortality, premature death. And it goes to the basics of human nature, doesn't it, Todd? I mean, we're supposed to be with one another. You're literally, your brain has social interpersonal connectivity to other brains, okay? And without that, we literally almost die internally like a plant that isn't water. And so senior living, right, provides not just housing, but an ecosystem where there's other humans to be emotionally interactive with, socially interactive with, cognitively interactive with, motorically interactive with, spiritually interactive with, right? And that's what healthcare is all about. That's the promotion of health. We're in a country where we tend to think medication, we tend to think supplements, we tend to think stuff we put in our bodies is the only way to generate health, and that's just not true. It goes back to some of the basics of feeling connected, having a role and purpose, feeling like I'm loved and being loved, and having meaning.
We came up 20 plus years ago with a concept that what we wanted to do in our communities, we have roughly, I think, 38 communities in 8 states, but we wanted in all of those environments to have people live out the balance of their lives on purpose. I think that key, and I'd love you to speak to, that whole concept of, if I have a purpose, obviously, I know for me personally, I get up in the morning and I've got goals. I've got things I want to do, or I know the day is going to provide me to do certain things, or I'm going to be with certain people. So if you could speak a little bit to that whole concept of living life on purpose in a community, I'm just curious of your take on that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful principle to have, a new perspective, because it's one of the things I talk to in my lectures with everybody. It doesn't matter what age you are. The earlier you get started in trying to identify your purpose, your legacy, the better off you're going to be, because purpose generates the motivation to get up each and every morning. Without it, you'll die prematurely. And so you and I are talking about social isolation and loneliness. There's not purpose there, okay? But most of the people watching this podcast haven't identified their purpose, because it takes effort, it takes time. And oftentimes purpose doesn't come from the human resources department. It doesn't come from the name tag. It doesn't come from curriculum vitae. For me, I was just sitting with someone who had all kind of resources, okay, Todd? And they asked me point blank, what do you want? What do you want to do? That's an interesting question when it just gets thrown at you, particularly when you're not expecting it. And my answer to it was, I want to give people hope.
Right.
And so that's why I'm breathing. Okay. It has, the other stuff I do is you'll find on my curriculum vitae, but that's my job. That's not my legacy. My legacy, my purpose, and it's spiritually bent for me, um, is to give people hope as best I can.
Hmm.
So if everybody watching today, living at New Perspective, working at New Perspective, uh, anybody at all watching on this podcast at any age, and just take some time, take a deep breath, and begin to think about, why are you on the planet? What are you here for? What's your purpose? And if you can identify that and follow that, that's where health will be found, and other people will follow you. That's how
That
important purpose is. So for your ability to, Todd, to identify that 20 years ago is terrific.
Yeah, I really appreciate your thoughtfulness on that. I have a very interesting, at least for me, a story. My mother, who were in her mid 80s, she was living alone in her own condo. Should have been in senior housing, socializing. She was a very social person, but she began doing this isolation and literally went from, the recliner to a walker and eventually a wheelchair because, her frailty. And this is what happens, I think, in loneliness, is that you become frailer and frailer. But it took about 4 years for me to finally get her to move into a senior community. And even then, the first 2 weeks she was there, she isolated. She had all her meals brought to her room. She didn't go down the hall. She didn't go down the stairs to the dining or engaged or anything. Finally, she did meet somebody. She was coming back from a doctor appointment. She met a couple who lived next door to her. And so they introduced, and they said, well, why don't you join us for dinner tonight? Well, that's all it took. She ended up going to dinner, and from that point on, she was at every meal. She got engaged in all the activities. I would go with her, and she was back. We got her out of the wheelchair, got her stronger, got her walking again, got her back into the walker, and we'd be walking down the halls, and it was every single team member, employee knew her. Hi, Shirley. She's hi this and hi that, and she's the happiest person in the world. I have that firsthand story that I know people can change. I know they can go from a wheelchair back to a walker and maybe even to a cane. And that makes you feel whole. That makes you feel like you have a purpose. I can get up tomorrow. I'm going to go do something. With the advent of more AI in the last couple of years, do you have any thoughts or opinions on does that potentially have an answer for helping people to be less lonely, or are we just still using a kind of a veil over the real problem of isolation and loneliness?
Yeah, so technology, it's always interesting. I'm a brain person, so I have sort of philosophical debates with folks who are big into AI. That the first word is artificial, right? So don't forget that. And what's between our ears ultimately is the greatest system ever designed. The biggest concern I have with what you and I are talking about specifically today, Todd, is there's nothing technologically that's ever going to take the place of one human holding the hand of another human, looking into the eyes of another human, holding one another, just being together, just literally being together. Literally today, as I'm saying this to you, I had a phone call right before this podcast of a lady, an older woman who was very frustrated because she just spent 10 minutes on the phone with a robot. In some ways, when you think about it, technology has been segregating us, has been, separating us. We might use it to get information quicker. We might be able to use it to write our reports now. We might be able to use it so that we don't have to go to the classroom because we don't need a teacher. But along the way, we're losing the human to human interaction. And there is going to be, and there already has been, consequences of that. And so that would be the big thing I would point out, that we don't ever want to lose human connectivity.
I couldn't agree more. That is what we're trying to do. A New Perspective is create the environment where people go from being frail to stronger, being more engaged, more active, more involved, and socially, spiritually, mentally, physically, they're they're blossoming even at the end of their life. And I think that it's a worthy goal. Like you have a purpose to share your message around the world, and we certainly thank you for your time today and your input. I hope maybe we can speak again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Todd, for all you do, and look forward to speaking to you again one day. Tell your family I said hello. Tell all my friends at New Perspective I said hello. And I think we provided some good information for everybody today, Todd. So thank you for the opportunity to be a small part.
Great. Thanks, sir.
Thanks for watching. We've got more great perspectives coming up in future episodes. So be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out.